we were always looking around for new technologies or business models in gaming where we could innovate. And so we discovered blockchain. We decided that was how we were going to make all games going forward. All applications should have tokens because a token is a share of the network effects of that product. And so if you want to share the network effects of your product, you should have a token because the token is the mechanism by which you do it. The idea behind the Mocaverse is we created an NFT collection, an ID system, and a token, which are all different ways that you can then participate in the network effects of our business and our ecosystem. The more we connect that ecosystem to other people, the more powerful all of us become because we're more interconnected.
Hello PlayToEarn family, we are here with one of the greatest leaders within the Web3 gaming space. And it's a very special episode for us because it's our first IRL Crypto Game Changers episode. And the guest sitting with us, he's at the helm of a behemoth of a company that has funded 500 projects and is valued at $6 billion. I'm talking about none other than Robby Yung of Animoca Brands. Robby, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm good, although I don't know if I'm going to live up to your introduction.
It's kind of fair because you guys were pioneers within Web3 gaming, and Animoca continues to support a lot of the projects. And
for sure. No, but please don't give me the credit. It's a big team effort. We have a lot of people behind the scenes there,
100%
making it work.
100%. And you're the CEO. Right, and I understand most of the investment decisions go through you. And I know that it's been a long journey where, according to your LinkedIn, you've been with Animoca for 10 years. So the question is, how did you develop to the leader that you're today?
I think that's just luck and hard graft, frankly. No, I think, I ended up working at Animoca Brands because Jawad, who is the co-founder of the business and our chairman, and I have been personal friends for a long time because we've been working in the tech business for longer than we care to even count at this point. So we met during the Web1 days in the 90s when we had our first startups, and we're part of a small startup community in Hong Kong. And we stayed friends through the years, and after I sold my last business, I ended up in 2012 joining Animoca Brands because Jawad had just started on this journey in mobile games a few years earlier, and they were making very good progress, mostly making apps for the iOS App Store. And I thought this was really interesting because I spent my whole career in TMT, in telecoms, media, and technology. And this mobile games seemed to me to be the culmination of everything I'd done before, because it's content, it's internet, it's advertising, it's media, all in one package. And so I thought, this is cool. Even though I didn't really know anything about games besides playing games, I thought this sounds like something that's really interesting.
No, that's definitely one of the greatest strengths of Web3 as well. But the question is, when did you guys decide to pivot from Web2 gaming to Web3?
Sure. So that was easy, actually, because for us, Web3 transitioning to focus just on Web3 in terms of games was both a combination of push and pull. So the push side was, as a mid-sized game company that was always, working hard to survive, frankly, with more successful times and less successful times, like most game companies. We saw the writing on the wall, I think, before some of the larger game companies, which was that the cost of user acquisition in games was going through the roof. And we just, unless you had a really big hit game and you had your own internal cross-promotion network where you could acquire users cheaply, there was no way to acquire users and make the math work. And so we were always looking around for new technologies. This was starting in 2015, probably, for new technologies or business models in gaming where we could innovate. And so we discovered blockchain. And we discovered blockchain and got introduced to a team in Vancouver who was working on a really cool hackathon project. And we asked them to work with them on this to help them distribute this game in Asia, particularly in China. And so we helped them to do the project, and the project turned out to be CryptoKitties, which was arguably the first blockchain game, because that team was became Dapper Labs, and they had invented the ERC 721 or the NFT standard only a few months actually before we met them. So like many things in life, it was just luck that we happened to meet them. But I think the part that we can take credit for is that during the course of that experience, which was primarily kind of the first quarter of 2018, we decided that that was how we were going to make all games going forward. We decided, look, we're going to keep servicing some of the games we have in existence now, the Web2 games, but this makes sense for us to make games like this, because now we can actually deliver digital property rights to players and fulfill that promise. Whereas before, we promised them that they owned stuff in games, but actually they didn't own stuff in games.
Yep. And so I imagine that there might be a whole plethora of challenges, right? And because I know you guys pivoted directly from Web2 to Web3.
Yeah.
And I imagine that there might be team building challenges. Have you faced, what are the greatest challenges in leadership that you faced while scaling at Animoca?
So I think there's always lots of challenges. I think the challenge pivoting from Web2 to Web3 was, at first, we didn't really know what we were doing, meaning that it was a new area and we were kind of paving new ground, because really we didn't have examples of how people created playable content in a game on the blockchain. So that was new. And so we tried to identify teams of smart people we could work with who were all, these ideas gestate around in society at similar times. Lots of people come up with, AI or whatever it is around the same time, because there are these movements in science and tech where people share knowledge. And so at this time was when we started talking to other teams that were also thinking about similar things, and some of those companies we ended up acquiring and working with. So one example would be our old friends at a game company called Pixowl, who had a product called the Sandbox. And so we acquired that team because they had also been thinking, how do we put our Sandbox game on the blockchain? Because if we had a UGC metaverse, it would be much better if people could own the land. And so we started working with them, and eventually, we acquired that business and launched the Sandbox together in Web3.
So acquiring and investing companies started from way back.
Yes.
When you just made the pivot.
Just made the pivot, exactly. Because I think we also noticed that in Web3, when we talked to Web3 native companies, they were all startups, right? I mean, OpenSea had just started, Consensus had just launched MetaMask not too long before, and all of these were new businesses. We invested in Sky Mavis, who made Axie Infinity, and they were also a new business. And so we were not a new business, we were just new to Web3. So we had some resources, we were a public company at the time, and we thought that we could be complementary to some of those companies by helping to support them, by making investments in them. And at the same time, we wanted to learn from them. We wanted to work and partner with them. So investment was one way to start that conversation.
So speaking of investment, I imagine that the criteria for investing has changed tremendously over time from when you guys started investing to now.
Yes.
So can you share something about what was the criteria in the early days, and
Sure.
what are the criteria right now?
So I think it's not necessarily that the criteria has changed so much as the type of companies and the maturity of the companies and the market has changed. So when we were investing in companies in 2019 up and through the end of 2021 probably, almost every company that came to us looking for investment was the first mover in whatever they were doing. Literally, you could have 100 conversations and there were 100 people making the first-person shooter or the first AAA game or the first Endless Runner or, whatever it was, the first fine art marketplace on Tezos, whatever. And so these were all firsts. And so that was a matter of just, making a bet. Do you think that a blockchain version of a first-person shooter is going to be good? Okay, here's the team doing it, right? Shrapnel, there you go, right? Or whatever it is. But over time, as the market has had its undulations, nowadays it's much more mature. the market for investment is much more competitive. Capital is not as easily available as it was 2 years ago. And so as a result, it's become more of a buyer's market, which means that we as investors are also more prudent about how we think about investing capital. We have not slowed down our pace of investment because we're strong believers in the space. But what we have done is we have started investing in companies that are slightly more mature. So in 2021 or 2022, we might talk to a company that was literally formed, 3 months earlier or 6 months earlier to develop a project. Whereas now we're like, okay, we want to see the project in alpha and see what the results from customers are first before we will consider an investment, because otherwise it's just too early, because the market's not so competitive that we will lose the deal, so to speak.
So when the project is in alpha, are there any must-haves that our listeners can listen and aim towards? Or is it on a case-by-case basis?
In a perfect world, you want to see a great team with track record and history, and you want to see ideally somebody else who you think knows what they're doing, who's invested in it, and you want to see traction with customers. And in the absence of two of those things, you want to see traction with customers.
No, that's a fair point. And so what are the next opportunities that you see for investments? I know you guys are already investing in games, but what's the next?
So we've branched out outside of games. So we invest in education, we invest in DeFi and infrastructure a lot. I think one of the places where we've been putting a lot of investment in recent months is the Telegram or TON ecosystem specifically. We were early backers of the idea of building content on TON. We acquired a studio called Gamey in Europe already 5 years ago, who was a maker of games on Telegram back when it was not sexy. And so we have a lot of experience in the Telegram ecosystem. And since the launch of TON, we think this represents a really exciting opportunity specifically for the games industry. Because if you think about gaming or the internet in general, mobile is the platform by which most of the world gets on the internet. And mobile, the two mobile gatekeepers for app distribution, Apple and Google, have been actively hostile towards our industry, meaning that if you launch a Web3 game, for example, on the App Store, you need to sort of neuter a lot of the features that involve Web3 to make it compliant with their policies. And so we don't actually get to show customers everything that we can do with our fancy set of Web3 tools, right? But Telegram is different. Telegram is very welcoming and open when it comes to putting Web3 features directly inside your game. And as you know, for a game player, that UI, UX, that experience for them is much better when you can have much tighter integration with your payment rails and other things inside the game.
Yeah, and it's easier onboarding all across.
100%.
More players for the ecosystem.
100%.
The entire ecosystem grows.
Well, and I think it's a great signal because as we've seen, there's been wild success of a handful of hyper-casual clicker games on Telegram. And to me, that's an indicator of what's possible if we have access to broad-based mobile distribution. So imagine what would happen if Apple and Google just said, come on, Web3, give us all your Web3 apps. It means that the products we're building resonate with customers. We just need to have a place to sell them.
So speaking of games and user acquisition, so across all these companies, have you seen a successful GTM strategy in play? Or do you guys see a pattern that keeps on working?
Yes, to an extent. So we try to replicate learnings that we have, because I think one of the things is we work with lots of projects to launch tokens, particularly, and to build tokens and to help them to construct token economic environments, to think through how to build their token economies, because that's a skill set that's very difficult. And you need to have people who really have experience and know what they're doing, and it requires a lot of math, frankly. And it's not as easy as it might look on the surface. We made that mistake for the first couple of years of being in Web3, where we built economies and we thought that we were doing our best, but it was actually more complicated than we realized. And you only figure that out once you have a live product in the market and stuff starts to go wrong, right? And you learn these lessons over time. And so I think we try to be a good partner to our investee portfolio companies and help them with some of these services, which we can actually offer from a centralized team at Animoca Brands, so that as a value add investor, I can actually say, look, we can really add value, because if you're building in Web3, I can help you with your go-to-market strategies. I can help you with tokenomics. I can help you with aftermarket liquidity support, because all of these things are essential ingredients to having a live token in the market.
True. But should most games have a token? What's your stance on this?
Yes.
Yes. So every game should have their own token.
All applications should have tokens, because a token is a share of the network effects of that product. And so if you want to share the network effects of your product, you should have a token, because the token is the mechanism by which you do it. Whether or not a token is used for fundraising purposes or retention and reward purposes, those are all secondary. It's mainly about the fact that now that we have token standards, we can actually share network effects. And that's a really big deal, because that's the glue that binds open source composable software projects.
I see. And so before, we're coming to the close of the interview, and this is a question that I've seen pop up on social media. Is Animoca planning to have an IPO? Because I see rumors of it around the internet. What are the plans with Animoca?
Well, you can always believe what you read on the internet. No, we were a public company listed in Australia for many years. We delisted in 2020. And at the time we delisted, we always made public statements to our shareholders and to the market and said we intend to relist over time. And so these rumors pop up from time to time, because yes, it is our intention to relist the business. As to when exactly that will happen, that's hard to say, because some of that is up to market conditions and other things. But yes, we definitely plan to relist the business in time.
And so as a fund, because I know you guys have taken many bets, how has the Animoca investment fund performed in your opinion?
So we actually, our investing strategy, we oversimplify when I say we've invested in 550 companies, for example. That's actually through several different buckets. So we invest as a strategic investor straight off the balance sheet, which is what you might call a corporate VC. We also invest through a venture capital fund called Animoca Ventures, which is an early stage fund. And we invest through something called Animoca Capital, which is a late stage private equity fund. So ventures and capital have external investors as well, whereas balance sheet is just our balance sheet.
I see.
So actually the bulk of our investments over time have come directly off our balance sheet, and there's more of a minority of investments that's come from the two funds.
Interesting. Well, those are most of the questions that I had. It's been an incredibly learning experience for me as well. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience?
Not really. I mean, I think for us, going back to this idea of network effects, we do have one project that we created which tries to encapsulate that whole idea of network effects, and that's our Mocaverse project.
Yeah.
Because the idea behind the Mocaverse is we created an NFT collection, an ID system, and a token, which are all different ways that you can then participate in the network effects of our business and our ecosystem, because we want to figure out how to share that. Because the more we connect that ecosystem to other people, the more powerful all of us become, because we're more interconnected.
100%. And I agree with you. And I think the community does as well. We had Tyler from Mocaverse in our previous episode.
Okay.
And that had received the highest views amongst all the other episodes.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so I believe everyone is bullish on Mocaverse.
Well, he's a charming and handsome young man too, so.
100%. But yeah, that's all the time we have for today. Everyone tuning in, thank you. And we would like to thank Robby as well for taking out time for this incredible interview.
Great.
So we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you very much, everybody.
All right. Thank you, Robby.
No problem.
Thank you.